Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today I'll be showing you one of my favorite builds to play using one of my favorite mods, the Feats on Even Levels mod. Now this build is totally playable and powerful without using the mod, so I will be covering how to build it in a vanilla game as well, but the mod lets us do extremely cool things much earlier in the run, which makes it incredibly fun to play. This build demands that enemies face you, forcing them to run forwards and impale themselves upon your spear, dominating the battlefield and protecting your allies as Baldur's Gate's only true tanking character, able to actually force enemies to attack you instead of your more vulnerable buddies, which basically no other character in the game can do, and then brutally punishing them for daring to so much as look at you. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Prometheus for Liberty for the $5 donation, Tarantula for the $5, Eternally Moist for the $5, and Craig Lang and John Walker for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. It really means a lot to me. Alright, let's take control. Now, of course, we're using a mod for this build, so I'm going to show you what mod we're using. It's the Feats on Even Levels mod, which you can find here by the Kenneth. The reason that I like this mod so much is that a consistent problem in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, and thus in Baldur's Gate 3, is that they combined ability score improvements and feats. What that means is that in practice, most characters don't actually get to choose feats. You're just taking an ASI, and especially in Baldur's Gate 3, where alert is mandatory for a lot of builds as well, you're going to end up taking 2 ASIs and alert on almost every build meant for honor mode. That really constrains your creativity and means that you don't get to do the fun things that feats enable as frequently or with as much success, because the power of your character kind of requires that you take those mandatory feats instead. Giving you a few more feats to play with obviously makes your characters more powerful, so this mod is obviously a cheating mod, but the real thing that it does is allow you to build more creatively and get to do fun things with your feats and interesting things with your characters without just having to pay the feat tax that is required in order to play Baldur's Gate for most characters, or use stat items in order to bypass that restriction, which Baldur's Gate does give you a few of those as well, but it requires farming elixirs and stuff. This just cuts out the middleman and allows you to actually take cool, interesting feats, as well as still get your character to its full potential. I'm using Minthara as the example character here, because of course this is a Paladin build, and she's the Paladin of the party. And also, I think that daring your enemies to come at you and then scorning their attempts to do so is extremely on flavor for Minthara. This character also makes an incredible custom character or party leader, because we get to lead from the front, we get all of the charisma skills and very high charisma, so we're going to be an excellent party face. And if you're building this as a custom character, what race you pick mostly doesn't matter, so you can feel free to choose whatever you want for flavor. We're going to get all of our proficiencies from our class levels, so we don't need to pick up anything in particular from our race. Mobility, of course, is always extremely valuable for a tank, and this character will want to position in the middle of all the enemies so that they target it. So Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf's extra movement speed are, of course, extremely valuable for us. And this character is rolling a ton of dice, both in and out of combat, so Halfling's ability to reroll ones is, as always, extremely impactful. I often suggest Gnome as one of the best races as well, with one of the most powerful abilities. For this class, it's a little less impactful. We'll have the Paladin aura boosting our saving throws to absurd levels regardless. So although the advantage on mental saving throws from Gnome is still incredibly powerful and makes a great pick anyways, it's less key than it is for some other builds. But again, you can pick whatever you want for flavor reasons. At first level, we're going to be starting with a level of Paladin. Starting with Paladin gets us heavy armor proficiency, which of course is very valuable for a character that wants every enemy to be attacking you pretty much all the time. The damage reduction and increased armor class here are extremely strong. Paladins also get to start with Persuasion, which makes you excellent at being a party face. As a charisma-based build, this character can be an excellent party leader, so starting with Paladin smooths out the early game and gets us extra in terms of our out-of-combat skills, and gets us extra combat proficiencies as well. For our Paladin subclass, we're going to be taking Oath of the Crown. This is what the build is based around because Oath of the Crown can force enemies to attack them, and also punish them for getting too close. Thanks to our unique spell access and our ability to force enemies to come towards us, enemies will be running at this character and then being hit with massive status effects, prevented from moving, knocked prone, debuffed to the point that they can't do anything. So enemies will literally be running towards us and then kneeling at our feet. Oath of the Crown Paladin also gives you Righteous Clarity, which is incredibly powerful in the early game. Bonuses to hit are excellent all game long, but especially in the early game, hitting your attacks is the difference between victory and defeat. So Righteous Clarity is one of the best early game abilities where you can boost your or your allies' attack rolls. For our ability scores, we're going to be basing everything that this character does around charisma. Our weapon attacks, our spells and effects, and all of our skill checks are going to be based on charisma. So we're going to go ahead and drop our strength, take 16 starting charisma, 12 wisdom, 16 dexterity to give us higher initiative. Of course, we want to go before enemies so that we can force them to attack us before they take their turn, and then they're effectively wasting their turn because they're trying to hit this nearly invincible character instead of our allies, and then 14 Constitution. We want higher Dexterity than Constitution because this character is going to be extremely tanky even with relatively low Con. In the very late game, you could consider dropping your Dexterity down to 14 and swapping to 16 Constitution in order to have more hit points and a better Con save, but overall, this is going to be the most important thing in the early game. If you're building this without using the Feats at Even Levels mod, then you will need to boost your charisma using Ethel's Hair and other story events that do that. So if you're building this vanilla, you're going to want to take 17 starting charisma. If you're planning to use Ethel's Hair on this character and use the mod as well, you can also just take 17 starting charisma and then you get one extra feat because that's an ability score improvement that you don't have to take. But we're going to demonstrate the build using just a normal attribute split with 16 starting charisma. For our skill selection, of course, this character makes an excellent party face, in which case the only really important thing is that you get persuasion. You can take a background like Guild Artisan in order to give yourself persuasion and insight, and then have a few more skill picks as well. But mostly as a party face, persuasion is the most important skill, alongside whatever other dialogue skills you want to use. If you're building this character on Minthara and thus getting access to it a little later in the playthrough, you may have another party face already, in which case your skill selection mostly doesn't matter, but that's the role that this character can fill best outside of combat. That's it for level 1, let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, of course, we want to enable our charisma-based character, so we're going to multi-class, and we're going to take a level of Hexblade Warlock. Hexblade Warlock allows us to use Bind Hexed Weapon in order to set our weapon's attacking stat to charisma, which of course is incredibly powerful for this character because we can then base everything around our charisma. Our attacks, our paladin spells, our paladin aura, and all of our abilities will all key off of the same attribute. Hexblade Warlock also gets us enormous numbers of other benefits. Hexblade's Curse, of course, is extremely powerful, increasing your damage output against specific enemies immensely, and we get our spells, which are great as well. The one extra Warlock spell per short rest is an extra Smite per short rest on any Paladin build, which is extremely valuable. That's a very important resource. And we also get a decent ranged attack in the form of Eldritch Blast, and we get Booming Blade to increase our damage even further. Booming Blade is ludicrously powerful, and it's just free damage on every single turn that we get to use it, so getting access to that for any melee character empowers them immensely. We also get to pick a couple spells here, and for our spell selection, we're going to take Shield. As a character that intends to be attacked very frequently, the ability to increase our armor class can just cause a bunch of enemies to miss. One of the great things about this character is we're actually forcing enemies to attack us, which means that even though we want enemies to attack us, we can still build really high armor class. A lot of tanking builds in Baldur's Gate 3 use soft aggro redirection, where you deliberately lower your armor class, and then that tempts enemies to attack you because the AI determines its target based on how easy it thinks it's going to be to hit you. For this character, we're forcing enemies to attack us, so we can stack our armor class pretty high, and that just means that enemies are doing less damage overall. So Shield not only can be used to prevent enemy attacks, but the later enemy actions in the same round where your armor class is higher, the enemies will still have to attack you, and thus will be just missing a lot of attacks. In addition to shield, we're going to take Hex. This is just a huge damage boost in the early game. Spending one of your spell slots on Hex can be really worth it in longer encounters compared to smiting, and of course you can carry it over between encounters as long as you can maintain concentration on it. In the late game, you may want to swap out Hex, and you can do a respec and pick up Armor of Agathis. The retaliation damage is, of course, also really nice for this character. Also, if you're playing this character from level 1 as a custom character, obviously you weren't able to attack using your charisma until this level, so you're just using a dagger or bow, anything that keys off your dexterity for the Nautiloid, which is totally fine. At character level 3, we're going back to Paladin. Of course, we want to get our Paladin abilities as soon as possible, and getting access to smites increases our damage output immensely. This also gets us a fighting style, and thanks to the mod, an extra feat, which we'll talk about in a second. First, our fighting style. We're always going to be using a two-handed weapon, so great weapon fighting is the natural pick for this character. It's just going to increase our damage output and make us much more reliable at killing enemies. Defense fighting style is also always a solid pick, so if you feel like this character is getting hit a little more often than you like, you can take defense instead of great weapon fighting, but the more damage-oriented pick, I think, is usually going to be better for this character. We will have plenty of defenses anyways. We also, of course, get Paladin spell access, and the spells that we're going to take are, of course, Command, the most important control spell for this character, and remember, unlike most Paladin builds, we have full Charisma and are going to be increasing our Charisma throughout the game, so our commands are actually going to work extremely reliably. This is also an enchantment spell, so it gives us access to the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. If we want to use that later on, we can do attacks and then use command as a bonus action, so we can get the extremely powerful combination there. Secondly, of course, Thunderous Smite. These are the two most important spells for Paladins in general. Thunderous Smite is a bonus action, it's not concentration, does extra thunder damage and knocks enemies prone. That's a relevant condition. It can definitely be worth sacrificing 2 damage compared to just a normal Divine Smite in order to knock enemies prone. Doing thunder damage is relevant for this character thanks to our items, and of course you can Thunderous Smite and Divine Smite on the same attack, which can let you output tremendous burst, so this is going to be helping in that sense as well. We'll take Bless also, although this character will often want to concentrate on Hex instead. If you are going up against a high AC enemy or one where you need the saving throws, Bless is a really good option to have. You can also use Shield of Faith or Protection from Evil and Good if you want those for specific days or specific encounters. Your spells after these 3 are a lot more marginal because you're mostly going to be using them for Smite, so you can take more situational spells like these. The real exciting thing, though, is that because we're using feats at even levels, we get a feat here, and the feat that we're going to take is Sentinel. Sentinel is really nice to have in the early game, but most characters can't afford to take it early because it delays your increases to your ability scores by too much. So a lot of builds that want to take Sentinel, and then later Polearm Master, which of course we're going to be picking up as well, don't come online until middle of Act 3 or so, when you hit around level 10 and get both of those feats alongside your alerts and ability score improvements and everything that you need. Thanks to the mod, we can get this early and start using this very cool combination much earlier. Now, obviously, this is an increase to our power level relative to the vanilla game, but in particular, this lets us use a very cool strategy that is fun to play and interesting to play around, especially early game when it's at its most impactful, because controlling the battlefield matters more when fewer enemies can teleport or attack you from just across the map. And so it just gives you a whole new playstyle that you can use for Act 1, so that's why I really enjoy playing this character with this mod. If you're building this as a vanilla character, then you obviously won't get this feat. You will still be able to use this combination just later on in the playthrough. At level 4, we get to take our 3rd Paladin level, and this gets us some pretty powerful options, but most importantly, it gives us Champion Challenge. Now, Champion Challenge is one of the cores of this build. It uses a Channel Oath charge and a bonus action, and every enemy within 30 feet of us has to make a Wisdom save or for 10 turns, they are forced to attack this character. And if they happen to attack another character, they attack with disadvantage. Now, Champion Challenge is actually different from Compelled Duel. Compelled Duel does not actually force the enemies to attack this character, even though it says it does. It just gives them disadvantage on their attacks against other targets. But Champion Challenge actually does force enemies to attack you. So all the enemies that you affect with this, and since our charisma is very high, they'll fail their saving throws pretty reliably, will always target this character. In combination with Polearm Master and Sentinel, that's going to force enemies to run towards this character, and if you position away from your allies, it'll often force them to run away from your allies, potentially triggering attacks of opportunity as well if they're already engaged in melee with other melee allies, and attack this character. As they approach you, you'll get a Polearm Master attack, which will then stop them in their tracks thanks to Sentinel. And so this character can stun enemies, taunt enemies, and shut them down, while also doing incredible damage, both on your turn and off your turn, thanks to being a great weapon user with smite attacks. This ability requires a Channel Oath charge. Those restore on a short rest, so you can do it pretty frequently, and that lets this strategy shine in basically every fight. We also get Command and Compelled Duel as spells, so you can remove those from your spell list here as well, and just pick up whatever else you want. The spells past this point are not significantly powerful. You're going to be using Command and Thunderous Smite and maybe Bless most of the time regardless, so the other spells that you pick are less important, but we do always get Command prepared, which of course is nice because it's a spell we always want prepared. At character level 5, we get to take our 4th level of Paladin, which again, because of the Feats at Even Levels mod, gives us another feat. Obviously, you'd get a feat normally at Paladin level 4 here, but thanks to the mod, we can now get the full combination of Polearm Master plus Sentinel online immediately. Polearm Master lets us use an opportunity attack whenever an enemy comes within range, and thanks to the increased reach of polearms, that's going to be whenever an enemy enters within 10 feet of us. And then thanks to Sentinel, when we hit them, they're going to stop moving. Usually, this will stop enemies out of range of attacking us, so against melee enemies, we taunt them, forcing them to run towards us, they approach us, we hit them with our polearm, and then they stop moving and just don't get to take their turn at all. Their allies will also come attack us as well, which is great because we're happy to have this character attacked instead of our allies being attacked, so we can control the whole battlefield with a big AoE taunt, as well as shut down specific enemies with these reaction attacks. The Polearm Master bonus action attack mostly works with hexed weapons. The attack itself will use our charisma to calculate its chance to hit, but the damage will weirdly use our dexterity, even with non-finesse polearms, because it's still slightly bugged. So it'll do 1 or 2 points less damage than it should when you're using a hexed weapon to attack with your charisma, but the damage from that attack is not the important part. It's applying the bonuses that you get when you hit an enemy, and often this character, of course, is going to be using its bonus actions on taunting or casting hex or something like that instead, regardless. So that bug won't affect you, and hitting with your attack is the most important part. At character level 6, we get to take our 5th level of Paladin, which of course gets us extra attack, doubling our damage output on our turn, as well as our damage that we're doing every single one of our opponent's turns, because we will always be using our reaction to attack. This character makes excellent use of its reactions, of course, because we have Shield, and we have the Polearm Master and Sentinel opportunity attacks, so we're always going to be getting value on enemy turns. We also get our Oath spells, Warding Bond, and Spiritual Weapon, and Warding Bond is pretty nice for this character as well. Most of the damage will be focused on us, but if an ally gets hit, being able to absorb the damage is still useful. So as a Paladin who tends to have fairly high health, we're going to have damage reduction from our armor. Just casting Warding Bond on a vulnerable ally is a very good use of a level 2 spell. Spiritual Weapon can distract enemies for if you don't want them to hit this character, they can go after the Spiritual Weapon, so both of these spells are pretty useful. Also, our normal spell selection, Aid is okay, though for a Paladin, usually you don't want to spend a spell slot on that, and for the rest of these options, you're usually not going to cast any of these level 2 spells. You're most likely to use your level 2 spell slots on smites, and then potentially things like Warding Bond if you want to actually cast a spell, or just commanding to enemies. Magic weapon can come up occasionally, so that might be what you prepare, but mostly these spells are just going towards smites. At character level 7, we get access to Aura of Protection, which of course boosts ours and our allies' saving throws significantly, which is great for this character because it's based on our charisma, so our charisma is going to be really high, boosting our saving throws more than other paladins will get. And so this character will have extremely high saves, as will any allies standing near you, and then they'll also be protected by your sentinel attacks. The other thing that we get, thanks to the Feats on Even Levels mod, is another feat. And for this feat, we're just going to take an ability score improvement and boost our charisma. If you're using Ethel's Hair going up to and already have 18 charisma, then you can pick Alert here. This character without Ethel's Hair does get slightly delayed access to Alert because we prioritize the Sentinel Polearm Master combo ahead of it. So you may want to use initiative gear with the character until we get Alert at level 9. But the increase to our charisma is very important at this point. We really need to be hitting our attacks. We also just got Aura of Protection, so boosting our the bonus to our saves, which is based on our charisma, is very, very powerful. And of course, everything that we do is based on this, so we're just increasing it. At character level 8, we get to take our 7th Paladin level, giving us Divine Allegiance as an Oath of the Crown Paladin. Now this character will usually have more important uses for its reaction. We have our Sentinel attacks, we have our Polearm Master opportunity attacks, we have Shield, so you're probably not going to be casting Divine Allegiance that frequently, but you can use this to save a vulnerable ally. This character will often want to stand next to allies because not only does that protect them with your aura and your sentinel attacks, it also means that enemies who are taunted towards this character will be threatened by both of you and potentially will provoke attacks of opportunity moving to attack this character. So stacking this character near your allies can be pretty powerful to arrange enemy movement. That means that Divine Allegiance will come up sometimes if an enemy is about to deal a bunch of damage to an ally. The way that this ability works, the tooltip is a little bit misleading. It heals your ally for double your paladin level in hit points, and then you take that much radiant damage, which you can reduce using damage reduction effects. So this gives you some options to just protect an ally a little bit, but mostly you're going to be spending your reactions on other things. At level 9, we get our 8th Paladin level, and again, we're using Feats on Even Levels, so this gets us our 4th feat. If you're building this character as a vanilla character without feats at even levels, at this point you will have 18 charisma from using Ethel's Hair, and you can now get Sentinel. You'll have taken Polearm Master as your first feat, and then Sentinel as your second one for this character, most likely, rather than the order we did it in here, because you want to make sure that you're getting your opportunity attack when you're taunting enemies. That's more important than the Sentinel half. But for the version of the build using the mod, we just get to take Alert here. That boosts our initiative so that in the late game, when enemies have really high initiative, we can still guarantee going before them, which of course is very important. Alert is really good for this character since we want to taunt enemies before they take a turn, so we're always going to be picking that up. At character level 10, we get to take Paladin level 9, getting 3rd level spells, which gets us yet another massive upgrade to this character, because as an Oath of the Crown Paladin, we get a 3rd level spell that no other Paladin gets, Spirit Guardians. Spirit Guardians is incredible for this build in particular because enemies are going to be running towards us, so we taunt them, they run at us, and then they take Spirit Guardians damage as they approach. This is especially good if we want to combine it with the Radiating Orb set and the Reverberation set, because when enemies approach, they're then going to take Radiating Orb hits as they enter the Spirit Guardians, and then get Reverberation ticks as well, which will potentially knock them prone, preventing them from acting at all. So as they run towards us, which they're forced to do, we can knock enemies prone, causing them to lose their turns entirely. In addition to the enemy that we can attack and stop them from coming close to us, this is a ridiculously powerful effect. It also is going to reduce enemy attacks if we're using Radiating Orbs, and since they're all going to be attacking this character with good armor class, that's going to cause enemies to miss all of their attacks constantly, so we get a tremendous amount of battlefield control, and actually get to tank properly, preventing them from attacking our allies, and then absorbing or ignoring the damage ourselves. In addition to that, we also get Warden of Vitality as an always prepared spell. This is a really nice non-concentration healing option for longer fights. This character can use the buff on heal items as well if you want even more resilience for your allies, though preventing enemies from doing anything other than coming after you is usually going to be enough. Our other third level spells, it mostly doesn't matter what we prepare. Our third level spell slots are going to be used almost exclusively for Spirit Guardians and Smite attacks, so we're very rarely going to cast other spells at third level. Elemental Weapon is a decent day-long buff, so if you have a lot of spell slots and aren't interested in using Spirit Guardians, you can concentrate on this instead, but mostly Spirit Guardians is going to be your go-to. You want enemies to come towards you, and that spell damages them when they do that, so obviously that's the pick. At character level 11, we're taking our 10th level of Paladin, which gets us yet another feat, and also Aura of Courage. Aura of Courage preventing Frightened is really useful in the late game. There's lots of fear effect, so preventing that as well as increasing our allies' saving throws really help ensure us against some of the easy ways to lose in the late game. And then thanks to Feats on even levels, we also get an additional feat. Now here we have a choice. We can make the character more accurate, by taking an ability score improvement and just boosting our charisma. We can also make the character more damaging by taking Savage Attacker, so if you want to maximize your damage output, especially if you're using stat items like Ethel's Hair or the Mirror or other ways to boost your charisma, then Savage Attacker is going to increase your damage enormously, so it's going to be the natural pick. I would generally err on the side of just making this character more accurate. The thing that you're trying to do is keep enemies trapped and locked down, so the damage output obviously is very powerful, but the core playstyle of the character relies on hitting your attacks and landing your spells, so increasing our ability scores is usually going to be preferred. But if you have other ways to do this, or are using the story events that let you do that, Savage Attacker is a tremendous boost to this character's damage. Although we're using a great weapon, because this character has Booming Blade and Smite attacks, Savage Attacker is going to generally be more damage output than Great Weapon Master for this character. We also don't need the bonus action melee attack because we already have that from Polearm Master. Though, if you're boosting your stats enough, you can also just take both Great Weapon Master and Savage Attacker on this character and get even more damage output. Other great options for feats on this character, because of course we have plenty of feats to play with. Mage Slayer is really nice, giving you even more ways to make reaction attacks. Lucky is really good. This character, of course, is going to roll a lot of dice, so having the ability to gain advantage or prevent enemies from hitting you is really nice. It can reroll enemy critical hits, which are one of the few ways that you can get in trouble on this character, so if you don't have crit immunity, Lucky is really good as well. But overall, we're just going to make sure that we're paying our feat tax while still getting to do the core things that the build is trying to do with the Polearm Master and Sentinel combo, thanks to the mod. And finally, at character level 12, we're taking our 11th level of Paladin, which gets us improved Divine Smite. This means we're doing radiant damage on every single attack. So, combined with the fact that we have Spirit Guardians available and are making reaction attacks, this lets us stack up Radiating Orbs incredibly quickly, as well as basically just giving us a level 0 Divine Smite on every single attack. So, getting to Paladin level 11 just gives us a huge amount of additional damage. If you did take Savage Attacker, the extra D8 of radiant damage also works with that, so it's even more damage output for the character. The more dice you're rolling, the better Savage Attacker is, so getting improved Divine Smite is, of course, awesome. And getting to Paladin level 11 while still getting all of those core features online lets you use this ability to its maximum possible effect. Alright, my friends, that's the build, but of course we can improve it even further with items and Illithid Powers, so let's talk about those. For items for this character, we have a truly ridiculous quantity of different options that we can use. And one of the great things about it is that not only can we customize the character for what role we want it to play, we also get to play different roles throughout the run, which contributes, in my opinion, to how fun this character is to use. You can also increase or decrease the power level of the character to your taste. Obviously, we're using a mod in order to enable this build, so if you want to use slightly less optimal items in order to keep things a little more balanced, you can still do that and get an excellent set of builds. That's my personal preference, but I'm going to talk to you about all of the different ways that we can build this character, or many of them. There's still many more, of course. Firstly, we need a weapon. Obviously, this is a polearm master build, so we're going to be using a polearm. The gold standard here is the Halberd of Vigilance. The extra initiative bonus is incredibly powerful, and when you make an attack as a reaction, you make it with advantage. Now, Sentinel is going to give us most of that benefit anyways, but the Halberd of Vigilance's bonus initiative and just solid overall damage output is always going to be excellent. Another great option is the Skin Burster. This can make us significantly harder to kill because every time we hit with the Skin Burster, we get Force Conduit. Force Conduit reduces incoming bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage by 1 per turn remaining, and then also can deal retaliation damage to the enemies when you take damage with additional turns of Force Conduit. So enemies who are hitting us will deal less damage and take damage in return. Very powerful tool. You can combine the Skin Burster with the Rippling Force Mail in order to gain even more Force Conduit faster, in order to set off these explosions and reduce incoming damage even more rapidly. So that item combination can make this character a defensive powerhouse against enemies that are doing physical damage. Another really fun option for a weapon is the Dancing Breeze, because it's a finesse weapon. So not only does it have a great weapon option, but this enables you to use a feat that you can't otherwise usually use, Defensive Duelist. Defensive Duelist is usually overlooked, but it basically lets you cast Shield with a reaction as long as you're using a finesse weapon. The Dancing Breeze is a finesse weapon, so you can get sort of infinite free shields if you want to use that combination. Since this character's reactions are pretty competitive, I don't think that that's the best way to build the character, but it is a fun option that you have available. But either of these other two weapons will, of course, be excellent. For your armor, you want the best defensive armors that you can get. In the early game, that's usually going to be the Adamantine Splint, reducing incoming damage and preventing critical hits. And then there's a bunch of different options for how you set up in the late game. I already mentioned the Rippling Force Mail. Of course, the Armor of Persistence is the best tanking armor in the game, reducing damage by half and then combining with the damage reduction that we have to reduce damage even further, as well as just being an extremely powerful suit of armor. Another option worth mentioning is the Armor of Devotion. This lets you restore your channel oath charges, which are required for this character to taunt. So if you want to go for more rests in between, more fights in between resting, then the Armor of Devotion makes an excellent option as well. Once you're in the late game and have access to Spirit Guardians, as well as doing radiant damage on every attack, the debuffing set becomes incredibly powerful for this character using Radiating Orbs. The Luminous Armor, the Callous Glow Ring, and the Luminous Gloves can let you stack Radiating Orbs extremely fast, and with the Boots of Stormy Clamor, you can also stack Reverberation, which can knock enemies down. If you value knocking enemies prone more than stacking Radiating Orbs, the Gloves of Belligerent Skies can replace the Luminous Gloves as well. The Coruscation Ring is less powerful for this character because it doesn't trigger off of Spirit Guardians, and we're not casting other damaging spells, so we can skip out on that one, which normally shows up in this item set. But for this character, we get other ring options. Another ring option that's incredibly worth mentioning, of course, is the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. We have Command as a spell known, which is an enchantment spell, and so when we hit an enemy, you can then bonus action cast Command. That's, of course, one of the most powerful and dominant strategies in Baldur's Gate 3. So if you want to increase the power level of the character, the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, alongside the Helmet of Arcane Acuity, which will make the save DC not only on your commands, but also on all of the other effects that you're using, Arcane Acuity will affect the save DC of Champion Challenge as well. So enemies will be very likely to fail that. Will mean that you'll be able to cast irresistible commands as a bonus action while also outputting tremendous damage. You will stack Arcane Acuity as well when making Sentinel attacks or Polearm Master reaction attacks on the enemy turn, so you're always going to have tons of Arcane Acuity stacks if you want to go that route. Other great options for your helmet slot include Birthright. Of course, Charisma is the key to making this character function, so increasing it is excellent. Or the always reliable Helm of Balduran. This character is intending to take hits, so healing incoming damage, giving you extra AC, and immunity to stuns and crits makes you significantly less easy to take down, and much more resilient, and able to tank for much longer to keep your allies alive. Some other items that are worth mentioning here, the Ring of Arcane Synergy works incredibly well with Booming Blade. We get additional damage equal to our spellcasting modifier, which of course is also our attacking modifier whenever we deal damage with a cantrip, and Booming Blade is a cantrip that's dealing damage, so the Ring of Arcane Synergy is awesome for this character. And the Killer's Sweetheart is always great for every Paladin. We benefit tremendously from critical hits, because when we get an automatic crit, that lets us trigger Critical Smite to do absurd damage, so that's also a great option. For our boots, you can go more defensive with the Boots of Striding, which will prevent you from being knocked prone and losing concentration on Spirit Guardians. You can also go with the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. This character doesn't otherwise get access to Misty Step. It prevents you from falling on ice and gives you Misty Step so you can position more easily. Just a really nice setup. For your cloak, the Flesh Melter Cloak gives you more retaliation damage, especially if you did respec to take Armor of Agathis. The Flesh Melter Cloak can work very well for this character, or you can just go with a more defensive option. Remember, enemies are forced to target this character, so unlike a normal tanking build, raising your AC is actually really good for this character, because that just means more missed attacks from your enemies. Finally, a couple other items worth mentioning. The Amulet of Misty Step gives you more mobility. The Surgeon Subjugation Amulet can let you paralyze enemies for even more guaranteed criticals, so you can combine this with guaranteed crits, especially if you're using Minthara, and so she will have the Luck of the Far Realms Illithid power naturally. You can then get the guaranteed crit, paralyze an enemy, that's more guaranteed crits, and, that's the Killer's Sweetheart duplicated. And of course, the Hellrider Longbow gives you even more initiative, so combined with the Halberd of Vigilance and the Alert feat, you'll always be going before enemies. That makes this the best bow slot to have as well. The fact is, though, that this character can play with tons and tons of different items, so I highly encourage you to experiment with what items you're taking on this character, because it's so flexible. The basic core strategy of Polearm Master and Sentinel and just having heavy armor, forcing enemies to come at you, covers so many bases that you don't really need items other than just a polearm, of course, to make this build very powerful. So because we have that additional power from using a mod, we can afford to play with more unique and interesting items. So definitely equip things that you have always wanted to try on this build and have fun with it. Finally, it's worth mentioning that this character may be the best character in the game at using Illithid powers, pretty much bar none. We use every Illithid power to the fullest effect and get tremendous value. Firstly, we have high save DCs, which will work off our Illithid powers, and we're making weapon attacks, so we benefit from both types of Illithid powers, but we also have special synergy with a lot of the powers. Favorable Beginnings makes our attack rolls and skill checks both better. This is two things that the character is doing a lot of. And Luck of the Far Realms gives us automatic critical hits, which work extremely well with our smites to do absurd amounts of damage. But there's also some lesser used powers that are awesome for this character. Charm works very well with the taunt, because the enemies are forced to attack this character, and then you charm them, preventing them from attacking you. Now, you will sometimes see enemies attack your allies as a result. It doesn't completely stop them from attacking, but I've also often seen enemies just fully skip their turns as a result of using Charm alongside Champion Challenge, so this can be basically an extra possible stun against certain kinds of enemies. Another great option is Shield of Thralls, which again works extremely well and uniquely well with this character. Giving yourself the temp HP keeps you tankier, and then also, enemies are forced to attack you. One of the issues with Shield of Thralls is that you don't know that it's going to work, but for this character, you can always force enemies to attack you, burst the shield, and then take the stun. So you can use this power even more efficiently than it usually can be used. This character also does a ton of damage, so we can trigger Cull the Weak extremely reliably to get more enemy kills and spread more damage across the battlefield. And especially because enemies will group up on you, you're going to be getting the AoE damage from Cull the Weak much more effectively than most other builds. Finally, Ability Drain is especially good for this character as well, because this is a per-turn cooldown, but it refreshes at the end of your turn. So similarly to Sneak Attack, you can trigger it on your turn, and then end your turn, and then trigger Ability Drain again on the enemy turn. You won't then be able to do it again come your next turn, but you can effectively get an Ability Drain half a turn early by triggering it both on your turn and with a Polearm Master opportunity attack. And this counts as a condition for the Boots of Stormy Clamor, so you can use this to trigger a bunch of reverberation stacks before the enemy actually makes their attacks, again knocking them prone and stunning them out of taking their turn. One thing, though, is that this will drain their charisma rather than strength or dexterity, because you are making charisma-based weapon attacks, so ability drain will work off of that, which is usually a less valuable attribute to drain, but it's still an extremely potent tool just because it adds a condition to enemies, and that is always going to be good on a character that is working off of the debuff synergy items. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at one of the game's most fun battlefield control characters. I personally really just love playing this character. It's so much fun getting to use these synergies and abilities, especially in earlier acts where normally they don't appear, which is why I really enjoy playing this character when I'm using the Feats and Even Levels mod. Obviously, you can also build this character vanilla. You'll just need to boost your charisma up to 20, and then you take your 2 feats as Sentinel and Polearm Master. And the character is still very strong, but the combo doesn't come online until much later, so you get less time to enjoy playing with the extremely fun version of the character. Though, of course, you're still just a Paladin Hexblade, so you're a very powerful character all the way through if you want to build this vanilla. As always, if you've enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment, and definitely let me know if you want to see more builds using small adjustment mods like this one. This obviously isn't a fully modded build, but it uses one mod to enable something creative, which I think is an interesting approach to character building. So let me know if you'd like to see more of this, or let me know if you're not interested at all. Very open to what your feedback is on this type of build in the future. And of course, if you have enjoyed the video, then hitting like and subscribing to my channel will get you more of this stuff in future as well. As always, my friends, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.